Hi, I'm Becca Falborn, your host and executive producer at Lime Studios NYC, and this is Mill Talk, the podcast exploring trends, big ideas, and creative works that relate to advertising, production, and the digital arts. In this week-long series, we'll meet the makers at the Mill, pioneering new technologies that are revolutionizing brand marketing in the virtual and physical worlds. Today, we're joined by creative director Jeffrey Dates. A lover of laughter and creative madness, Jeffrey uses his wealth of experience to direct world-class visual effects projects. Ever inventive and imaginative, Jeffrey is always in pursuit of ways to enhance his comedic, character-driven stories. To that end, he was instrumental in the conception and development of the Mill's real-time character animation system, Mill Mascot, and he continues to innovate by creating groundbreaking work in the virtual character arena. We'll be speaking to Jeff about the power of virtual production technology, from efficiencies to its ability to visualize creative thought. Welcome, Jeffrey. Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you.
Can you give us your elevator pitch, a little background on how you started out in the industry, your current position as creative director at the Mill, and the work you've been doing with Mill Mascot?
Yeah, wow, an elevator pitch. Well, I mean, I guess I started probably about 20 years ago in commercials. My background is in animation, so I was doing animation director. And then when I came, that was in small studios in Texas. And when I moved to New York, worked in commercial visual effects up here, always with sort of character and comedy, animated stuff is my focus. And
hmm
came to the Mill and focused on, the big tentpole visual effects projects, and eventually started directing character work. And the Mill mascot stuff, real time characters was always something that I was interested in because I wanted to tell animated stories quicker. Like, it takes a long time to animate content and stuff. And so as game technology and tracking and hardware and all this kind of tech got cheaper and more readily available and looking better, I was able
hmm
to sort of push the boundaries of what people were doing with it. And for me, what was most appealing was live characters. How can I get characters to interact with viewers and tell those stories, and how to produce content much more quickly? So yeah, that was the sort of the where it came from and how we've been pushing it. And now we're using it for all myriad of storytelling and live things.
That's awesome. And so, for our listeners who may not be as familiar with the concept, I'd love if you could define what virtual production exactly is and how it works.
Yeah, and virtual production is one of these terms that I think is used a lot of different ways. I think probably in the industry and officially what virtual production is the kind of on-set visual effects that occur, like in The Mandalorian has this great use case that they have online that everyone's been pointing to, but it's using the latest cutting edge game technology to make on-set visualization much more accurate, and
hmm
so you can see what you're filming. So like in The Mandalorian, for instance, a lot of some of these exterior shots were, rather than going out on location, they built the location in a computer with Unreal Engine, and then were able to sort of display it on a large LED screen. And when you line the camera up and the camera tracks and the background sort of moves at the same time the camera does for perspective, and you have an actual talent standing on the stage in front of the screen, when everything sort of lines up right and the lighting's correct, it looks like you're really out on location and you can move the camera around, but it's all sort of done in a studio. So I think the idea of using virtual game engines and virtual CG stuff in real time in the camera in situ to sort of get results is really probably the most literal definition of virtual production.
hmm
But I think when we talk about it a lot, I hear it represents anything real time. So I think as an extension beyond that, game engine technology, real time rendering, all of that I've heard, falls sort of in that idea of virtual production. But I do see a distinction between actually what virtual production is and real time as a whole. If
Got
that
it.
if
Got
that's
it.
clear, I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. So, which kind of leads me to my next question, and how it's incorporated in what you're doing every day. So, how do real time technologies lend themselves to the Mill's pipeline, and has it impacted the client feedback process at all on projects that you guys have been working on?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, just like any new software technology, real-time tech and game engines and has spilled into literally everything we do. So we use it for linear commercials, like just regular old visual effects projects, and
Hmm.
we use it to accelerate and improve the quality of our pre-visualization when we're working out how to film a project.
Hmm.
Like we were talking about, we also take it on set to visualize. We also solve some visual effects things, so now we don't have to green screen all the time. Sometimes we can use LED screens to do the sort of what you would replace the green screen in post now can be done sort of live on set in camera.
Hmm.
So that has helped. And then when we take it outside, well, and then there's character work. A lot of the stuff I focus on is real time characters and all and any manner of things, whether they're just creating offline animated content as footage as opposed to shots, all the way to live interactive characters that can stream on Twitch.
Hmm.
And then we push into sort of these more the newer markets, the sort of experiential kiosks and how we're using it at conventions and or fully immersive like VR and AR combination environmental things and just things that we had never imagined before deploying, putting on headsets or walking into spaces that then are controlled by virtual characters or virtual experiential things like AR, like going through museums with your phone and getting more
Uh-huh.
information as you look at stuff. And so we use it literally across the whole spectrum of projects we do.
So, for listeners who might be curious of some projects that maybe you guys have worked on in the past year that they may have seen, are there any examples that you can share?
We're doing a car commercial that I think is very sensitive about the fact they're using virtual production. So I
Hmm.
won't mention the brand because I think the idea is to fool the idea that they actually went on these locations to film the car in these different locations as part of the gag. But
Hmm.
um, that was a virtual production with a big LED screen, and the car sort of was on a stage to make it look like it was out on a range on a mountaintop somewhere or whatever,
Hmm.
and that kind of thing. So that like we're using it all the time. I don't know. And then I personally do like character projects.
Uh-huh.
So we've done projects for HPE where we've leveraged traditional animated content. Like there was a particular project for HP, this big red furry monster for a campaign,
Uh-huh.
this IT monster. And to make one sort of beautiful AAA visual effects animated commercial is a big endeavor all around. It's time consuming, it's expensive, and all that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
And to leverage that asset and to bring it into a game engine, rebuild it, and then have it where we can perform it live, we were able to then just generate footage for this character. So he was able to go to convention, an HP convention, and interact with the viewers. We could run a live commercial that would play on a large screen, and we had a little sensor, and a person could walk up to the sensor and move their hand over it and interrupt the commercial by taking control of the character and
Hmm.
then puppeteer the character, and then when they let go that he goes back to performing the commercial. So a real unique way for the viewer to interact with the content and the character. um so yeah, there's we've done, I mean, just in the last, well, and these were all like in the last year,
Uh-huh.
of what we've been doing. So with the pandemic and being able to work from home has really accelerated our need to be able to do more of these virtual productions from home because not everybody's wanting to fly off to Chile or somewhere to film
Or even
anymore.
able to at that. I mean,
Yeah, exactly.
it's kind of like, as we're seeing the world reopening, as everyone keeps saying, and vaccinations becoming more prominent, um, I think the one thing that's still going to be a little bit slower to go back to somewhat normal is traveling for productions like this and people willing to travel for productions like this. And then, people realizing that they don't need to and that they have these options of something that is more technologically advanced than they've ever really experienced before. So,
Yeah, it's really interesting how the pandemic has changed the way we work and how we're solving these problems. And we're seeing a lot of brands wanting to have animated characters now on social media. Interacting on TikTok is a big one. Everybody wants
mhm.
their branded character doing the latest TikTok dance. um, Streaming is another thing. We support characters that go on to Twitch and stream a lot, and they're fully animated and stuff. So all of that can all be done from home and supported from home, which I think is also pretty exciting because I don't think we would have entertained that idea this time last year, you know?
Yeah. So, I mean, which kind of brings me to my next question, or, it's a little bit of curiosity that's been sparked by what you're talking about now. And that's, you know, since the pandemic started, do you feel like this part of the industry was kind of like a fire was like lit there and it accelerated faster than it would have if the pandemic didn't happen?
I mean, for me personally, it has. I would think so, right? I mean, the like to have people not have to travel all around and be able to film, live action. There's, the virtual production isn't a silver bullet. It doesn't solve everything for
Hmm.
every case, but it does eliminate that for a lot of cases. And so having that as a solution to solve for some of these, I think was accelerated because everyone's
Yeah.
looking for needs on how can we get this, how do we film this, how do we make this. And then same with characters, real time characters, something we've been pushing, is something we want to do. But I think now that talent and getting on set and having this becomes a little bit more, it's just a bigger deal now with everything. Animated characters and the ask for it is more and more, and TikTok has definitely elevated that, and I think that sort of aligns with what's been going on for the last year. And then there's a big conversation, and I think that was happening right before the pandemic of real time virtual humans. I think everybody's
Hmm.
looking at that, and we're seeing now there's this technology coming out by Epic called Meta Humans, and
Hmm.
it's going to really make it accessible for indie artists, indie developers to sort of have access to these tools to be able to make real time humans. And however they deploy them, that's what I'm excited to see, because we're sort of at the dawn of this new idea of how all these. What does it mean when you have an internet full of virtual characters all
Yeah.
interacting like we're used to?
Hmm.
So yeah, I think it has. I think it's caused everyone to think about it in a different way because everyone's sitting at home now. So
Hmm.
just at the very least of being able to get together with our group or our team and record something,
Hmm.
we've reworked that completely, and now now we can do it from home. And I think that's something we always thought we could do before the pandemic, but I don't think anyone's really pushed it because it was like, yeah, we'll just go to the office and do it, but or go to the studio.
Hmm.
So I think from that aspect, yes, totally.
Totally. And to grow off of that, with any type of production advancement that can revolutionize an industry, there comes the question of how does it change the workflows? So with this topic in particular, we've seen the question raised, will virtual production make post work obsolete? And so what's your take on that?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think it is post work. I mean, I think the same artists and technicians who are doing traditional post are migrating and cross training to, your visual effects supervisor now is learning about virtual production
Hmm.
processes and what to do when they're on set. So I think, post is everything after the camera stops. And I think that's still possible. We still need to do that, like I said, it's not a silver bullet to solve every problem. So a lot of those new kind of artifacts that are appearing when we do these productions still need to be dealt with and how we handle them. And so, no, I don't think so. I think it's just an extension of. I think it's just one
Yeah.
more thing. When we started getting into like camera tracking in the last, we've seen a huge evolution of how camera tracking has worked in the last, say, 15 years.
Hmm.
Where it used to be almost done by hand to then computers could track markers to then now they can auto track without markers. Well, now you can do it. So I think this just is another extension of that idea of now you can have CG in real time in the camera view and as you're comping things together. But then as you take that, and a lot of time it's for visualization. So
Yeah.
um, no, I don't think it's going to replace post, but I do think it will extend it and probably offer opportunities for post work that weren't there before.
Totally. I mean, it's just funny because you think of when people there's like that saying, "Well, fix it in post," and it's like,
Yeah.
sure, but now we have all these other opportunities to fix it in many different ways.
Exactly. Yeah, now everyone's looking to fix it in camera, and that was
Yeah.
always a visual effects joke, right? But now I
Yeah,
think it's more true of we actually can fix it in camera. So
totally. So, for this next question, I'd like to backtrack just a little bit and tap into your intriguing background in character animation and the work that you've been doing with Mill Mascot. So, real time has changed the way we use characters to tell immersive brand stories. Can you let the listeners know where you see Mill Mascot and other virtual production tools taking real time character animation?
Yeah. And it's Mill Mascot represents sort of, well, it's probably about a little over 5 years old at this point. And the
Hmm.
idea was, as game technology was coming online, how do we sort of represent characters? And mascot is this idea of stylized motion. So it was, and in sort of a room space environment. So puppets was really what mascot represents.
Uh
How
huh.
do we get cartoony motion? So as that evolved and as we got more sophisticated, the asks got more sophisticated.
Hmm.
Brands didn't want just puppets, they wanted fully animated characters. So then we've expanded outside of sort of the mascot idea into fully realized motion captured characters. And doing that from home has really been advanced in that traditionally when you do these big motion capture projects, you go to a stage and they have cameras and everyone gets in the suit with the ping pong balls, and you've seen Lord of the Rings or Avatar and that kind of thing. And that's that's still valid a way to do it, and probably the high watermark for fidelity. But as we're doing it from home, new technologies have made that ability to do that at home much cheaper and much more efficiently. So there's these suits now that don't need cameras. They're called inertial trackers, and they use these little sensors, and you wear this little spandex suit and you get pretty good tracking for your character. And just being able to now have a way to capture a performer's motion, we can take them on set and they can be in situ, and you can actually perform the character live with other actors.
Wow.
We can record offline now. And then there's even much more DIY, like low cost systems, like
Hmm.
um, the Vive headset for virtual reality has all of this really great hardware for tracking. And you get these these, they call them lighthouses, but they're just two little cameras. They're just on these little tripods in our room, and they basically build a volume in your room, wherever you are, room space, room scale,
Hmm.
and then they track all of the sensors that they have. So what we've done and what other ingenious people have done has taken these sensors and sort of strapped them to your head and your body, and it's a clunky way. But when you hook all that up to a character in a game engine, now all of a sudden you have this really high fidelity tracking in your house, and it's for a few $100s for the price of a Vive headset and some trackers. You can get
Yeah.
into this and start doing it. So just as like what's happening now with that is really cool. And then to answer your question more specifically, everyone's looking at right now digital humans. That's the sort of thing everyone likes. And so with meta humans coming out and being able to make that more accessible, and there seems to be this real desire to, how do you represent a human in virtual space? And so I think that is a noble challenge, and that's something that we need to do. And I think it's either right or wrong. So I think it's
Hmm.
it's an easy bar to know if you've done it right. And you've people have heard about the uncanny valley and stuff, and
Yeah.
there's all kinds of ways to stylize characters to handle that. But I think what I'm most interested in, what we're looking to innovate in, is in the space is, how do you tell cartoon stories in real time? Like, how do you tell Bugs Bunny or Daffy Duck? How do you get a performer that can do something that doesn't look like a man in a suit? Because the way
Hmm.
that cartoons behave are so outrageous. Performers can't do them because they're physical, real humans.
Hmm.
So looking at ways to, for lack of a better term, puppeteer cartoons and the technology there, I think that's what we're looking forward to. That's going to be some real interesting, and that's where machine learning and all
Hmm.
these very clever ways to translate user motion and reinterpret it into completely different ways. They do it a lot with animatronics. When
Hmm.
it's in film, they'll make these, Jurassic Park dinosaurs or something, and there's like six guys back there with little, like, remote controls, and one guy's the whole job is to control the eye direction of which way the
Yeah.
monster looks, and then another guy does the eye blinks, another guy does the toes and stuff like that.
Hmm.
I think, taking that idea of how you're controlling these characters that aren't necessarily human with talent and puppeteering and performance, I think, and taking that idea and then transcribing that into cartoons, or doing our own versions of animatronic characters that you just wouldn't be able to perform with a guy in a suit. It just won't work. I
Yeah.
think that's sort of where we're at now and what we're pushing forward with, of how do we do more stylized motion. And it's what's exciting to me. Like, I'm ready to to start doing that. And there's all kinds of ideas and white papers being written, and innovation in that, and that's what we're looking at as well.
Yeah, which kind of brings me to my next question. So, like any cutting edge new technology or technique, I'm sure there's still a learning curve for a lot of people. So, from your perspective, what are the potential challenges of virtual production that we're up against, moving forward, maybe currently now in the past year?
Yeah, the number one we're seeing is just education, and it's education of our artists, so that they can ramp up to what they need to. It's education of our creatives, so they know how to think about it, and education for our clients, so they know how to think about it, and education for brands, so they know what's possible. And I
Hmm.
think it's our place to help them along the way, and we're still exploring it and discovering it ourselves. So it's the Wild West right now in sort of how it's being done and who's doing it and what it's being used for. So I think that's a big challenge that we're seeing, just the entry level of just people even understanding what we're talking about, and getting everyone to think like that. And then once you do that, then it's communicating, getting the language, like we were talking at the top of the call, of virtual production and semantics of when you're talking about something, everyone's saying the same thing, because
Hmm.
all the terms and all the sort of hardware and software and technology is so new.
Hmm.
Again, it's buzzwords and stuff, and everyone understanding that aspect, and getting different, not departments, but just different sort of focuses to all communicate with each other,
Uh
because
huh.
everything is in the computer, and we're talking about animation, we're talking about visual effects, we're talking about things that have to exist. You still need the traditional asset creation, so you're still looking at modelers and texture artists and riggers and all these things to build our environments and to build the characters. And that sort of philosophy and that sort of sphere of experience doesn't really change. It maybe sort of adapts how to do that for game engines, but it's pretty much the same principles. And then getting those assets to these, what would these new guys that are doing real time, how do those two teams communicate, and how do producers are coming online and they're learning all about this new technique, and how do they
Hmm.
communicate. So I think it's education and communication, and just getting these workflows standardized, because right now everybody's doing it differently, even applying the same techniques differently, just because there is no standardization yet across any of this, and it's all sort of early, like I said, the Wild West. So whoever's going to be the last guy, or whoever standardizes how we send the signals or build these things, I think will just make it more applicable for everybody. But yeah, it's totally just communication and education. I think those are the two biggest challenges we're having right now.
For sure. And it
Yeah,
sounds like it's just in such early stages that it's kind of hard to predict, right?
I think so. I mean, we can sort of see their trajectory. I mean, it's once people, there is a pool of people who are very good at this already, and depending on different aspects of what it is, whether it's linear visual effects, virtual production, or it's real time characters, or even experiential stuff. I'm interested in just to seeing how it's pushed. How do we do these things? When we start seeing Netflix productions completely done with real time, and it holds up and it looks well, that's an interesting thing. Or when we're
Hmm.
telling reality shows on Twitch, but it's all done with virtual characters in a way
Yeah.
that there's just the way that it all goes in all these different directions, I think is there, and people are pushing into it and pioneering into it. Um, and just as a thing that's really exciting is Fortnite is a huge game, it's Epic pushes out, it's huge,
Yep.
multi-billion dollar industry.
Hmm.
They last year did a Travis Scott in-game concert, which was
Hmm.
this idea of you log in and there's a live perform Travis Scott, and they did this because they're in this virtual world. It
Hmm.
was uninhibited by reality. So he's, 800 feet tall, and there's planets and explosions and all this stuff. And you can get right up on stage and do all these. Well, that idea of this community shared experience on a established platform that everyone already knows how to use, um, was an eye opener, I think, for a lot of people, because that could be extended to,
Yeah.
doesn't have to be just for Fortnite. But as brands start expanding out and looking for ways to reach out, I think these shared virtual spaces and experiences, especially during a pandemic. That's why it was so hot last year, is because you can't go to concerts. And so driving that and looking at what these next world of the virtual multiverse and all these things that Epic are trying to roll out, and we're seeing it all, with VR
Hmm.
chat and all these kind of things. I think that's really all of the tools and all the experience that we're talking about now is going to lend itself to this sort of virtual world of storytelling and experiential stuff that's just on the dawn right now.
Yeah, we actually discussed the Travis Scott concert during our first series of Mill Talk with Boo Wong, who's also from the Mill, and how it's a live real-time case study right now of, how that's changing the innovation of this technology now and moving forward. So we love to close out these interviews with a future focused question and get subject matter predictions from our guests. So, how do you see virtual production shaping the future of advertising for one, production companies, and two, for brands?
Well, I think it's a lot on what we touched on. I think
Hmm.
how we engage with our audience is going to evolve. It doesn't have to be just a linear commercial anymore. I think we're seeing that there's probably less television being watched. Everything's now online and stuff.
Hmm.
So the way any ways that allow us to engage with the audience interactively, I think we're going to see much more of that. I mean, that's what's exciting, and how we do that. There's so many. There's a whole spectrum of ways to do that. And then for me personally, what I'm interested in is, like we were talking about, is these character this idea of cartoons. How do we
Hmm.
drive cartoons in real time? And I think that's something I want to see as a and as the technology and our understanding of how we're engaging with our audiences grow, the appeal for that and stuff. So I think that's what it is. It's really about engagement with the audience. It's
Yeah.
because I think, like you said, the Travis Scott as a case study was a really good eye opener for so many people, because it just
Hmm.
shows how shared experiences like that are just driving it. And now you can have anything, and it doesn't have
Yeah.
to be full CG. Virtual production can be, when we can go back to concerts, I can see having the ability to put on a headset or log into a website, but be able to move around virtual cameras in live action space
Yeah.
to attend concerts that you can't physically attend. And,
Yeah. Or
everyone got
sporting events, or really anything that
exactly.
we normally
Yeah,
would have, done in person. That's, I think, is still a bit of a ways away until we're seeing that we're able to go and experience them in person like we used to. So technology like this is just going to not only open more doors in innovation, way or realm, but also just in a creative way. I mean,
exactly.
you even just you touching upon, cartoons in general, like how cool would it be to watch a live cartoon TV show? Like that
Exactly.
would I would love that.
Or a
Like I
user can give feedback to it. If you have, like,
Yeah.
if it's a Twitch episodic thing and you have a chat window and everyone's chatting, and that sort of can influence the characters, then you're
Mhm.
getting into this weird hybrid. It's just fun things to think about. I
Yeah.
don't, like, there's all kinds of, how does story change and develop and expand when the user is actively contributing to it? I think that's appealing. So I think that's a big thing. And then, you're talking about production. I think production will evolve with it. I think, the
Mhm.
onset tools to be able to visualize, as visual effects and animation become more and more prevalent in
Mhm.
some of these projects, or when they're prevalent in these projects, you will now have better tools to visualize them and to interact with them on set, and to, yeah, it's just helps that process. I think it's going to take some of the ease or some of the pressure off the post,
Mhm.
because you can now you're making decisions in the camera with everybody live, as opposed to sort of folding it in and looking at a green screen. And everyone's seen the problems with performers in front of just a green world talking to a tennis ball. That doesn't have to be how we do it anymore. So I think
Mhm.
productions will start to get savvy to all of these abilities to lay AR on top of stuff, and lay or visualize the camera, and sort of mix all of this together to generate new ways of presenting these effects.
Yeah, for sure. And it's just also kind of it's mind blowing in a sense. I mean, we think about 30, 40 years ago when people thought about what the future was going to look like and what the 2020s, and now we're here and we're like we don't have flying cars yet, but we have all of this crazy technology going on that has been accelerated by this global pandemic that we were, a year later now, we were not ready for it. And now we have all this, this stuff that we didn't really have as prominently as we did before. And just seeing things like all of the examples that you've mentioned today, really taking, hitting strides that I'm very surprised about, and I think that a lot of our listeners probably are, and even people like you who have been on the front lines of this development. So, but thank you so much, Jeff, for taking
Oh
your
yeah.
time out today to chat with us and to inform our listeners on the future of all of this crazy technology.
Yeah, no, thank you. I love talking about it, and it's so exciting to, like you said, think about all the different things. There's every day there's someone doing something new, and they post it, and you're just like, wow, that's so cool. And I think that's what's exciting. It reminds me of visual effects like in the '90s when everything was new and Jurassic Park was coming out, and everyone's learning how all CG sort of works.
Hmm.
It's that again. It's this new renaissance of excitement around stuff. Everything's new. There's no experts in this yet.
Yeah.
We're all pushing and figuring it out. So I love that idea.
Thanks everybody for listening to today's episode. You can learn more about Mill Talk by following the Mill via @MillChannel across platforms. You can also learn more about Lime Studios via @limestudios.tv on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Don't forget to search the hashtag Mill Talk to stay in the know on serious topics and guests. We'll see you next time.